Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's first morning session on Cloud Enterprise. I'm the moderator, Nate Ward. This session will consist of three 20-minute sessions followed by a Q&A. For the Q&A, please submit your questions in the Whova platform as the Zoom chat has been disabled. Our first session today is Migrating GIS to the Cloud by Brendan Joyce from Maine Water and Lindsay Walker from ROK Technologies. I will share my screen for you both.
Cool. Sounds good. Am I all set to go?
All set.
All right. All right, should be working now.
Looks good to me.
All right, cool. So my name's Brendan Joyce, as Nate said. I'm here with Lindsay from ROK, and she'll introduce herself later in the presentation. I'm the GIS coordinator at Maine Water. Been here for 5 years. Gone through a pretty good GIS kind of evolution through that and development, and basically going from paper and paper to the cloud, kind of paper to digital and then to the cloud. So get started. This is my dog Hobie. He's been keeping me company all quarantine. Pretty lucky to work at home. So just a little bit about Maine Water Company. We're a privately owned but publicly regulated water utility. We own 12 divisions across the state of Maine, and then we actually contract operate a few more. So we have a spread from the southern Biddeford-Saco region all the way up to the Millinocket region, which is probably 3.5 hour drive. So geography is definitely a challenge for us. And we have a new parent company of San Jose Water as well as Connecticut Water. So we kind of have a bigger national scale with our parent company. 35,000 connections, or closing in on 100,000 people. So one of our biggest challenges was this geographical difference of our locations, and how do we standardize all of the divisions, because they're all in a different spot. So when I started in 2015, each system had its own file geodatabase, and each had their own way of naming things. So one of the first big tasks was trying to get sort of a standardized naming convention, and then also combining all of them into one combined system. So you could, back in the day we had, one editor at a time. We had a corporate office in Saco, which was our biggest division. And having that network in Saco really limited all the other divisions, like a Millinocket or a Bucksport that's 2.5 to 3.5 hours away, with not the same internet infrastructure to kind of have VPN connection, direct connection to our internal network. And also our IT department was based in our parent company, Connecticut. So we kind of didn't really have that personal touch a lot of times. One thing that I've seen this as I've gotten in the field is Connecticut and Maine Water are under engineering with their GIS instead of their IT, which also could be kind of a factor of being on two different teams almost, or two different sides where it's harder to work together or reach your goals. But one thing that really helped was having Connecticut, our original parent company, wanting to go through the same thing. So we Maine kind of rode the coattails, and Connecticut kind of had more power to try to make this stuff happen. So in our attempt one, we tried to deploy a multi-user ArcGIS Enterprise and a portal with our IT team. IT was going to host it and then set up a virtual machine kind of solution for us to manage it. So the end result of that first attempt, even with their limited GIS experience in IT, they were able to get something working, and it worked adequately, especially at first. And then what we kind of saw happen pretty quickly within first few months was things really like updates and ongoing support, where when something went wrong is we were kind of on our own within the virtual machine, but we were kind of locked down in the virtual machines to say that, we needed passwords. We're very locked down in general outside. So we would need to put in tickets for a lot of little things. So we didn't really have power to troubleshoot. And when we had to troubleshoot with IT, it was kind of like, we're Googling it anyways. So it was actually, we came to the decision both internally with IT and the GIS group to say, hey, let's look at a cloud solution where it really gives us more power, but also we have the kind of like the experts in GIS and /IT, because IT basically would want to give us a way to do our jobs. But as for being the GIS experts, they self-admittedly were not. So this is where Rock comes in, which with our enterprise attempt number 2. So go ahead, and Lindsay.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Walker. As Brendan said, I'm work with ROC Technologies. I'm the Director of GIS Managed Services over at ROC. Next slide, please, Brendan. Sweet. So at ROC, we hear a lot from organizations like Maine and their parent company, Connecticut Water, organizations where GIS has become so intertwined with these really advanced IT concepts, DevOps concepts, even the database stuff has become way more advanced. And especially when you're trying to do what Maine Water was trying to do, which was deploy the enterprise platform, so ArcGIS portal, ArcGIS server, data store, et cetera. When you're trying to do that for the first time, it really kind of plays on experience that GIS folks don't necessarily have. And also it's a really unusual system for IT to administer. So you end up in this kind of interesting place where the average GIS person, especially when they're deploying it for the one time that they'll deploy it for the company, they wouldn't necessarily have that experience. And then IT is not really equipped or it doesn't really have the time to or resources to do a full enterprise deployment. So at ROC, that's where we come into play. We work, this is kind of what we do on a day-to-day basis. We often work with organizations like Maine and Connecticut Water, where they've tried to deploy the enterprise system in a cloud type of format internally and have just run into challenges getting it to be secure or performant or meet their expectations. And there's so many nuances to deploying these things that if you haven't done it a lot, if you don't have that super specialized experience, it can be really challenging to do. So like I said, our sole focus as a company is architecting, deploying, managing the enterprise suite in the cloud, and helping organizations to overcome geographic challenges, right, where you've got distributed office locations, helping organizations to have secure and very excellent performing cloud GIS systems. So next slide, please.
Yeah, one thing I forgot to mention, Lindsay, was me. I kind of just started and learned when I started here, and I edited a lot, and I'm a little better now, but I am no expert in this at all. So when Lindsay starts showing me certain things, I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. And so I really am on like the user end where I am not in the development end or the deployment end. So not only was our IT kind of leaning that way too, but us as users as well, like, whoa, what does that mean? So yeah, I kind of forget to mention that. Go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and what we really strive to do at ROC is that we take care of a lot of the kind of maybe slightly more boring, like back end type of things that like most people aren't super interested in, so that GIS people can do what they really want to do, which is like build up cool portals, right? Like push out cool data, give their users like really sweet tools to do the things that they need to do. That's like our ultimate goal. Is like if we can enable somebody to do those things, then we've done our job correctly. So with just kind of at a high level, how the project went for Maine and Connecticut Water, the first thing that we do with organizations is we really try to hammer out their goals and workflows that they're looking to have in the cloud, because anything is possible, right? So we can make the technology do what you want it to do. So let's figure out, like in an ideal world, what it is that you'd like to do. And I think that for a lot of organizations, when they realize what's really possible, especially when you take advantage of all these tools that are available to you in Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure's cloud, any of these really big cloud organizations, when you realize what's possible, I think people get really, really excited. And so that's our first step, is just to talk about goals and workflows. And then we move on to kind of the next step, which is the part that, again, takes kind of the specialized knowledge that if you're doing this just once, it's not really worth you learning how to do this stuff, right? But we do it on a day-to-day basis. So we worry about how to architect everything. So you wanted to do these things? Okay, cool. We figure out how to get the technology to do that for you. So that's kind of the second step. Let's get it deployed. Of course, then we go through, we test it, we make sure that it meets and exceeds your expectations. And people are usually, like I said, pretty excited about it, because when you move your GIS up to the cloud, not only are you addressing like immediate considerations, like, okay, all of my organizations at different geographic locations can have the same performance, everybody can access the same data, you can have multiple users editing, you have all that, but then you can take advantage of these really cool tools that are, kind of can tie in with GIS, but are outside of GIS that these big cloud platforms offer. So then the third step, once we've gotten all that in place, kind of showed it off and gotten everybody really excited about it, we manage it on an ongoing basis. Now, the thing to really highlight here is that like Brendan and everybody over at Maine and Connecticut Water, they do cool stuff on their own, right? So like with the actual GIS, like building it for their users, administering it, they still do all of that stuff and they do really cool stuff with it. We just manage the underlying architecture so that nobody has to worry about it, right? IT doesn't have to worry about it being secure. The GIS folks don't have to worry about it performing well. We take care of all of that stuff so that, again, IT can focus on what they're good at, GIS can focus on what they like to do, and everybody is pretty happy, and hopefully we've done our jobs well. So next slide, please. So really quick, I'll just highlight here, this is what we ended up spinning up for Maine and for Connecticut Water in Amazon Web Services. Now, some of you may look at this diagram and you may be like, oh yeah, I totally get like everything that's going on here. But probably for a lot of you, when we start talking about like, oh, look, there's a virtual desktop solution. Look, there's subnets that have like associated security groups. There's a NAT gateway, there's storage buckets. For a lot of GIS folks, like you probably want the benefits of those particular tools, right? Like super cheap cloud storage, super quick performing virtual desktop solutions that make it so you don't have to buy super expensive computers to run GIS applications. But you wouldn't necessarily look at a diagram like this and really immediately understand the benefits. So again, that's kind of where we came into play, was listening to what Maine and Connecticut Water really wanted. And then telling them, okay, cool. Yeah, we totally know what you want and why you want it. And here's how we can get you to have the functionality that you need. So with that said, Brendan, I'll kind of turn it back over to you to talk about the ongoing benefits and what it's been like for you guys.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for that. This diagram really helps me because I'm not crapping on Maine, but we're an old state and we're behind in technology. And one of the we've kind of had growing pains at Maine Water, and just kind of I kind of feel like I'm on a political campaign of the last few years of trying to gain support for this, and it's worked, and we're here, we've done so much, but like things like this are really hard to explain to managers. It's very hard to quantify. If you show this to a manager that doesn't really know what GIS is anyways, you're going to have to go through each one and explain, which I like to do. I don't mind doing, because it's hard to really garner like all the awesome stuff that you get from doing this. And when they're going to just see like the bottom line money wise, maybe, of what it costs. So it's something that we've come a long way and I'm really happy about. So yeah, just the ongoing benefits. We did this last winter. I think it was November, I want to say maybe last fall, a year ago. I think it's been just about a year. Right before around the holiday season is when we were launching our first web viewers. So we kind of Maine was on ArcReader as of 2019, sadly. So I was doling out ArcReader versions and they would download them on these laptops and stuff like that. And getting that web viewer up as soon as we got the portal up was huge. And it took a lot of training, but well worth it. multi-user database that I do updates. I did one last night, an update. So that kind of stuff is live. The performance during COVID. So like, that's probably one of the biggest things as well, is I've worked at home since March 12th, I believe. And I mean, there's no different. The only slow part is actually going out of the workspace to go into VPN to like get a file from our network drive to, to look at a PDF or something. So, but it's just the same, it's consistent. And I have an editor in Bucksport and I have an editor in Camden Rockland, and it's been, everything is a level playing field. And that's one thing that we struggle with, as being so spread out throughout the state. We want that remote division to have the same access. And that's really what this allows us to do, especially during COVID, where, we have such small offices where we'd either switch off 1 week or the other week, someone's on call or something like that, if the office is really small, or people would just be working at home, and we would rent trucks and they would just do their work orders on their own. So access anywhere, anytime is great. The login is all the same now with that portal login. That's also tied to our SSO, which is really helpful. So that's one less password they have to remember. People still do make errors and talk to me about it, and I'm always happy to help. And no, this is your real password for your laptop. That's what you're doing, stuff like that, which is always the thing. I like training a lot. So, and then
5 minutes left.
Yep. And then one more example would be, we're on 10.841 portal. That was one of those things that we didn't really get with our IT. Even before we were on portal, we were probably 2 to 3 years behind on just like things like ArcMap, when we were in those separate geodatabases. So I opened a ticket up with Rock about, I want to say when did that release? Late July and August. So I opened up a ticket in August, and by October or by September, we were really getting into that update of 10.8.1, which now I know there's actually a lot that goes into it. They gave me a great document outlining all the specific steps, which I didn't know there was that many, because again, I'm not on the back end looking at the web adapter that needs to be updated, or the SQL server. Like I don't know SQL, I don't know all that stuff, but I know just how to publish services and make maps and really go to the end user. So when I really struggle with that, I'm able to make tickets through this, Rock portal. It's kind of like an IT for GIS, and it's just an included service with that subscription or that management. So yeah, we're really happy with it, and we're still kind of meeting to discuss further things, especially on the back end, where maybe like custom widget, like now that we have this good base going, it's kind of like trying to knock out a few more things that we might not be experts in, like custom widgets or something like that. And I've been really able to keep up with the latest apps like field maps. I'm really excited for. We use Collector a lot, and everything's through that one enterprise portal login, and it's been great. So I hope this just gives another option for utilities. We're around 100,000 population served, probably well over 500 miles of main. So I don't know if the size might matter to some, but I'm sure Rock could be able to talk to you about that. So yeah, that's all I got. Lindsay, you got anything else in closing?
No, I I think that you kind of covered everything, and just as Maine and Connecticut have been so awesome to work with, so we really enjoy our jobs because we get to make people happy and then work with awesome people like Brendan and Dan over there at Maine and Connecticut. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Right on time.
Thank you, Brendan and Lindsay. As a reminder, the Q&A will be at the end, so please submit any questions you have to the Q&A session on Huva. And up next is ArcGIS Opportunities with Cloud Native Technologies by John Waterman.
All right, thanks. Can you guys see my screen? And Right.
Can't see your screen quite yet
No, you can't see my screen.
on my end. There we go.
All right, I'm gonna do a little deep dive into ArcGIS cloud native, or taking advantage of cloud native technologies with ArcGIS. It was a great presentation by Brendan and Lindsay, higher level success story of migrating to the cloud. And I'm gonna dive a little deeper into some of those technologies to make it happen. First of all, I'm going to back it up. And some of the reasons why people go to the cloud are security, reliability, increased performance, of course, cost optimization, and something called operational excellence, which is just improving best practices all around your enterprise. So this is pretty standard AWS cloud migration reasons to move to the cloud. In order to better understand what native technology is, it's probably good to review some of the common migration strategies. So AWS has 6 common migration strategies. And the first one is rehosting. And if you look at this gray dashed line up here, this is really just taking your existing on-premise server and pushing it up to the cloud, and manual install, manual configuration, manual deployment. It's just really just hosting your current server in the cloud. And you can certainly do that, but that is not really taking advantage of all the great advantages of the cloud. So that's really the most basic, what maybe some people think of when, am I going to move to the cloud? I'm already hosting my server. Why should I move to the cloud? Some of these other migration strategies really take advantage of the cloud native technologies, these advantages that you get from just moving to the cloud. So the next one is called just replatforming, repurchasing, and refactoring. The one, refactoring, is really taking your current environment and really just re-engineering it and moving it into the cloud to take advantage of all these serverless managed services that really are the future of cloud computing. And what I'd say is refactoring obviously costs a lot more money, takes more time. If you want to get into the cloud quick, this rehosting or lift and shift is usually kind of the first step for people. And then they kind of go down this path of incorporating more cloud technology into their environment. Another thing to look at to better understand what the cloud can give you besides just hosting your current environment in the cloud is the cloud responsibility model. So AWS has a cloud responsibility model. And what happens when you move to the cloud is everything in the orange, AWS is responsible for. Everything above in this blue area, the customer is still responsible for. So you get quite a bit for free with regard to moving to the cloud, just being in the cloud. So, with regard to security, with regard to updating the hardware, tracking the hardware, all the updates in the hypervisor level. But you're still responsible for the top, and you can reduce your responsibility by using these cloud native technologies. And one last view of AWS is to understand their global reach. So they have a huge global infrastructure. And this plays into the cloud native technologies that they offer, their cloud native offerings. And so to better understand that, it's good to just understand the vast network of resources that AWS makes available to you. So not only used to be large enterprise businesses could were the only ones that could take advantage of this type of functionality. Now, the smallest organizations, for not a lot of money, can push their code to Spain, or they can push it to Cape Town and put it right next to their customers. And that has applicability to ArcGIS, which I'll get into right now. So now I'm going to run through some of the ArcGIS Cloud Native opportunities as I see it, and maybe in the Q&A we can dive deeper with folks. But the first thing I'll talk about is ArcGIS Cloud SysOps and DevOps. So SysOps is systems administration in the cloud. DevOps is supporting your developers and creating environments and a workflow that is more continuous and allows productivity, better productivity with developing applications. So what Esri has done has they've worked with AWS and for systems administrators in the cloud, they've released these templates. And basically they're descriptions of architectures. So all different types of architectures. And within AWS, you can deploy these architectures very quickly using a technology called CloudFormation. So these templates are really just JSON files, and in AWS there's a designer, so a visual designer. This is a screenshot of just a part of one of the simple designs, similar to what Lindsay showed on the diagram. But really the take-home message of this is, as a systems administrator, you can quickly deploy one of these very complex scenarios within a couple hours. Really, it's 5 minutes or an hour to prep a couple things, and you push a button and you wait 2 or 3 hours, and you have this enterprise system and that you can work with and install and really move into the cloud very quickly. One of the big advantages is these proof of concept projects, so POC. So if you talk to cloud consultants or folks that are working in the cloud, or how do you get to the cloud, everybody talks about doing a POC. And the reason why that acronym is so popular these days is because you can deploy one of these systems very quickly and with sometimes with free tier level resources, or just very minimal costs, and do a proof of concept in the cloud with your data, with your code. You can also do quick modeling. You can create environments, test production, development environments for modeling, spin up one of these environments, do your image processing, your modeling, spin it down. You can also update and keep track of versions. So there's all these different cloud formation templates that Esri provides. So this is pretty huge mainly for small organizations that really in the past 10 years, 15 years have never been able to do something like this cost effective and quickly. So this is a diagram similar to what Lindsay showed. And so there's a template. You can spin one of these up very quickly. This is the bare bones. There's no Esri technology here, but the next template here is a single all-in-one. So you can quickly push out, this one virtual machine with all your Esri components on it. There's one for high availability. So you're actually pushing 2 different stacks in 2 different availability zones in case one availability zone goes down. And then there's actually even super complex architectures where they're duplicating duplicating ArcGIS server instances in different VPCs or regions. So that is a huge benefit to cloud native, and it's cloud native because it is a service that AWS has created to help manage infrastructure. The other type of advantage with cloud native is with monitoring your GIS systems. So, and cloud vendors will have specific technologies, and with AWS, it's called CloudWatch, and you can gain all sorts of information, CPU, memory information. You can push up custom metrics. So if you really want to monitor in one dashboard, you know, what services are running, what, how many instances of your map services, etc. You can push up custom metrics to CloudWatch and have a dashboard with all that information. Elasticity is core to cloud computing. You've probably heard a lot about elasticity, but basically putting this load balancer in front. So this kind of router that all your internet traffic requests come to this load balancer, and it routes to different ArcGIS machines. And these machines, right in this diagram, you could have two running machines, and it's load balancing between these two. And if these two get, if the memory or the CPU or however you set up your health checks on these machines, it could be anything from, it could be custom, how many instances of a map service are being spun up. It can spin up new machines to help facilitate the extra traffic you're getting. And that's pretty 101 elasticity with cloud computing. Another one is high availability. This is very specific to ArcGIS server. So how does ArcGIS server, there's a configuration store with ArcGIS server, which is really the state of your ArcGIS server. And so in the past, it's been a point of failure. And now with cloud computing, you can put these in a relational or a database, managed database, or an S3, an object store. So these data stores are cloud native, and they're available to all the servers that are running in your ArcGIS server architecture. So they're sharing the same config store. So if one of the machines goes down, the other machines can still pick up the same information from the config store. So all the machines are in the same state. Something fairly new to the GIS world, that's been around for quite a couple years, is this thing called containers. So you've probably heard folks talk about Kubernetes, or in AWS, they have a couple different flavors. One, it's called Amazon Elastic Container Service, or ECS. And a flavor of that is called Fargate, which is a managed service. It's really easy to get into, where we have one project, huge enterprise customer, where we're building an ArcGIS server implementation using Fargate. If you've heard about Kubernetes, that's more of a open source standard, and it's a little more complex, and you can definitely run that as well. But the enterprise customers that I know of are running Fargate, and basically a container is kind of like your own server. It's a space where you're going to install the ArcGIS bits. You're going to, and then maybe do some ArcGIS workloads, you know, image processing or pre-processing for some sort of workflow. So these containers are getting spun up on the fly based on demand, and they're running on one server. And so you can think of, instead of, you know, having 10 different servers processing your data, you have one server with containers, and each container is doing your processing. So, you know, 5 years ago, we were doing that with just EC2 instances, services, and auto scaling. And now this containers and Kubernetes, ESRI uses this internally for some of their DevOps. So definitely something to look into if you're a software developer wanting to create some sort of disconnected workload architecture. So another cloud native technology within AWS is called Lambda. And this is a serverless technology where in serverless means that it's a managed service. You're going to deploy code, but you don't know what server that code is running on. AWS manages the server, where it's running, most of all the it manages most of the infrastructure for you. And it's really cheap. You only pay for execution time. There's definitely limitations with it, but it's very scalable. We use this for running small workloads. For example, we have a series of Lambda functions that will do processing of spatial data. It will reach out to ERP systems, pull in the data into Lambda, call out to the ArcGIS server Python API, do some geocoding, do some simple, point and polygon processing, and push it into other databases. And so it works really well for quick processing, super cheap, where you can use
5
Python,
minutes.
.NET, gotcha, .NET. Another example of cloud native technologies with ArcGIS are if you want to improve your map caching delivery. AWS has a global infrastructure of a CDN called CloudFront, so you can push out your map caches to edge locations all throughout the world and get them closer to your customers if your map services are still slow. You can also store your map services in S3 and save a lot of money in disk space. You can spin up these architectures, build your map caches, put them in S3, and then totally get rid of your ArcGIS server instance, and your services will still work. If you're a data modeler, there's something called data lakes. You should look in the data lakes, and some of these engines called, one of them is Amazon Redshift. It's a data warehouse. And you can stick your spatial data, your non-spatial data, all this stuff together, mixed into, pretty much configure it into one data store and use SQL to extract information and do analysis with it. So you can do your geoanalytics with data lakes. You should look into that. Another area I think is big is image storage in the cloud. One of the challenges with image server in particular is managing imagery. We've worked with clients that are consuming lots of imagery every day, time series imagery. And what they're doing is storing it in S3. If you store, it used to be back in the day, you would have to store it on a disk, like a NAS. And if you ran out of space, you'd have to expand the disk, or you'd have to update the references to these storage devices in your ArcGIS image server, Mosaic data set, and SQL Server, or wherever you have these database tables. Now with AWS and other cloud, there's technologies where you can use S3, which is object storage, or there's also something called the Amazon Elastic File System, which is a file system that you can attach to different instances. So these instances are actually using the same file system. And with CloudFormation, you can deploy ArcGIS Server Linux instances, where in the past it was very hard to do. I think I got a minute left. I'm going to jump down. This link to this blog is in the presentation. I'm just going to jump down to the very end. Talk a little bit about ArcGIS Pro app streaming. So we're working with a big enterprise customer to help them figure out how to migrate their ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS Desktop environments to the cloud. So if you're looking to do that, I would recommend looking at Amazon AppStream or Workspaces, and there's ESRI documentation on both of those. And that's all about trying to get your streaming close to your data that's stored in AWS. But that said, I think I'm going to cut it short. I could talk forever on this stuff, but I will pass it back to Nate.
All right. Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Sure.
And you're right on the money with that minute left.
Great.
Again, the QA we'll be doing at the end, so please submit your questions if you have any to the Hoover platform. Up next is Cloud 101, Taking ArcGIS to the Cloud by Tim Small from GIS Inc.
Thank you, Nate. Hope you can see and hear me.
Yeah, we can do
Okay,
both.
give me a shout if not. But hello, everyone. Great to meet everyone virtually. As Nate said, my name's Tim Small. I'm with GIS Inc. Super pumped that we have the opportunity to be part of this meeting today and talking about obviously a very popular subject, being the cloud. And what I'm going to do is kind of echo what some of my peers have discussed already today, which is to share some ideas and strategies on taking ArcGIS to the cloud and some steps that you can follow. And again, this is Cloud 101. We're going to stay basic. We're going to stay high level. We're not going to get too far into the weeds here in the next 15 to 20 minutes. But, you know, obviously this has been a unique year, and we at GIS Inc., as I'm sure many other Esri partners, have seen an increase in organizations looking to adopt the cloud for additional services needed to support things like remote workforces or providing access to their enterprise web GIS. And given the fact, you know, that there's been 4 presentations even just today on this subject, shows that this is a hot topic that's definitely been amplified as a result of the pandemic. So the challenge is for many organizations that are starting to think about this is when to use the cloud, or which provider is best for your organization, or maybe how to make the transition and what's the best strategy for that transition. And we know that answering these questions can feel a little overwhelming, but we believe, as many others have said here today, that the cloud offers organizations incredible benefits. So why listen to me? Why listen to GIS Inc? What is our expertise in this area? I mean, we've been strategically aligned with Esri and the ArcGIS platform for over 29 years. We have over 130 passionate GIS professionals with one core purpose, and that's to help our customers and organizations fully leverage their GIS investment to gain better insight through location-based technology. And we're the first Esri Platinum business partner to gain the ArcGIS Cloud Services Specialty designation. And this is extremely important when it comes to migrating ArcGIS to the cloud. In fact, we've been deploying ArcGIS Enterprise both on-premise and in the cloud for over a decade now, as you can see from this diagram. GIS Inc.'s history here goes all the way back to 2009, when we deployed our first cloud solution using AWS for a health agency. And since that time, you can see from this chart this increasing trend year over year with organizations looking to adopt the cloud, and just how much that's picked up pace over the last 10 months or so. So as I mentioned, COVID has been, or has had, a huge impact on this trend, and we're seeing even more activity in the space. And this goes along with what the industry is telling us. If you look at the image on your screen, the chart from RightScale on the left-hand side shows the adoption rate from 2018 to 2019. And you can see there the 3 big providers, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. And then what's interesting is if you go back a year and you compare this with 2016 to 2017, you can see the saturation is still among the big 3, but it's growing. And what I take away from this adoption rate is that providers are competing for our business now. And this is good for all of us, because this competition is going to drive cloud services down. So now really is the perfect time to start looking into cloud services if you haven't done so already. So what does the cloud offer? We kind of think it's best to categorize the benefits here into 4 areas. So first, you have capabilities. So the cloud goes way beyond the traditional capabilities that we experience within existing data centers, and it replaces the legacy environment with services that provide things like load balancing and serverless computing and elastic storage and services and automatic updates. All these components are embedded inside of these cloud providers. The next is performance, taking the capabilities that we just reviewed and then optimizing them through this infrastructure through things like scalability and elasticity, reliability, redundancy, some of the things that John brought up in the previous presentation. And then we have things like cost, which is the big one, right? In this case, you have the benefit of trading capital expense for variable expense. So you're avoiding things like hardware refreshes, which occur periodically, and cost. And again, the economy of scale is going to help us gain efficiencies in the cost. You pay as you go and for what you use when you use it, which can be kind of a tongue twister there. But basically, the more that you end up using, the less you pay. And then lastly, security. There's a security model where we as users of the cloud can still maintain physical security, and we share the security model with the cloud. So basically, cloud providers are responsible for security in the cloud, and we as consumers are responsible for security of the cloud. So when should you consider moving to the cloud? There could be a variety of scenarios that could act as a catalyst for this decision. So perhaps your organization is thinking cloud first for all its initiatives. Maybe you need to process and analyze large amounts of information and you don't have enough horsepower to do it on premise. Or maybe you need access to modern hardware and scalable systems that your IT department is finding it difficult to keep up to date because they're just so swamped with their daily routines. Maybe you only want to pay for what you use, or you've dealt with or fearful of a security breach, which seems to be happening all too often. And that's the subject I want to hone in on a little bit more here. So let's talk about security. So with this notion that your data stored on servers and systems that you don't own or control, there are myths that cloud computing is inherently less secure than traditional approaches. And the paranoia around this is due largely to the fact that the approach itself feels insecure. So why is it more myth than reality? I want to highlight 4 features that demonstrate why. So when it comes to strong perimeters and surveillance, precautions include high fences, barbed wire, concrete barriers, guards that patrol the area, and security cameras. When it comes to controlled access, employees, vendors, visitors, etc., are all physically separated from a company's mission critical data. When it comes to expertise, access not only to the best data centers, but also gaining access to highly skilled IT professional teams. And then lastly, when it comes to auditing, undergoing regular audits to protect against flaws in their security systems. So I'm sure at some point in time, many of us have seen data centers that kind of look like this. And in a total opposite end of the spectrum, I mean, these cloud providers provide state-of-the-art facilities. What they also do is they provide cloud security offerings that are put in place to help organizations focus on their missions and minimize distractions of having to build and maintain in-house IT data centers and solutions. On this slide, what I'm doing is highlighting Amazon and Microsoft. They provide these bundles or offerings that include things like FedRAMP certification and FISMA HIPAA compliant environments where you can just grab hold of that area and start to deploy your solutions within there. So long story short, don't be afraid of using the cloud because of security concerns. The next area to discuss here is important. It's how to get started. So what should you do to prepare? What are the steps that should be taken? So first, when it comes to evaluation, I mean, what are your goals? Look at your current ArcGIS infrastructure. How is it deployed on premise? And what do you want to get out of a migration to the cloud? Next, document the process. Document enough so you can help others understand the process and what you're trying to do, because remember, this is going to be a big paradigm shift for some folks in your organization. Next, when it comes to architect, talk to the experts. Architect out the right solution to fit your goals established in that first evaluation process. And then educate all the stakeholders in your organization that are going to be affected by this. Then deploy. Use best practices and patterns when it comes to deploying. And then finally, migrate. Choose the right migration path or method. And there's a few buzzwords that go along with this. John had mentioned them earlier. Things like rehost, refactor, re-architect, rebuild. It's pivotal to understand the nuances and complexities when it comes to migrating, not only just the infrastructure, but the content. Content tends to be one of those things that gets overlooked. In fact, we call it really the biggest risk. And it's critical to understand this distinction here. So let me run through some important questions to consider when it comes to content migration. So first, what are you migrating? How complex is your deployment environment? Do you need all of these environments? What is it going to take? What's the authentication model, or what's the process? How many databases do you use within your GIS infrastructure now? How will you move your data and information into the cloud? Are there any automations or scripts? What's in place now? Or where does ArcGIS Pro and ArcMaps sit? Where are your editors? Are you going to keep them on premise, or are you going to move them to the cloud as well? What about services that are hosted or published in your enterprise GIS? What about republishing these or migrating your web maps and apps? What other business systems might break if you move the GIS? These are all important considerations to think about. Here's an example of a typical cloud deployment for a small to medium-sized organization using the base components of ArcGIS Enterprise. We have our web adapter and your remote desktop gateway sitting in the public subnet. Then you can see we have portal, ArcGIS server, and data store sitting in our private subnet, all within a virtual private cloud within an availability zone inside of a region. And in this case, we're using AWS as the example. So again, this is a typical example we use to help folks migrate to the cloud. What's interesting is within your base ArcGIS enterprise deployment licenses, you can set up an active production and a passive production that you can use as a disaster recovery model or a failover in case the active production goes down. And you can have those other systems turned off and standing by, and again, only used when needed. So we asked the question in one of the previous slides of what happens to your desktop. Where does your desktop go, and how do you move your editors from on-premise to the cloud? And there's several options here. Most cloud providers provide a virtual environment, creating a virtual machine and installing ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro in that environment. Some have virtual workspaces like AWS. They also provide this AppStream service where you can have like a thin client and still access ArcGIS Pro within that client. In this animation, this is ArcGIS Pro running inside of a web browser using Amazon's AppStream technology. You can remote access through a thin client to access your desktop, and you can build out these environments to spec whatever you might need. And again, that's the benefit of the cloud. You can stand up and scale the environments to fit your need for that day's activity, and then you can spin it down when you don't use it and you don't pay for it. So provision and use what you need on demand. Another area to review is monitoring. So most cloud providers already have built-in monitoring capabilities for monitoring things like your CPU, RAM, storage, bandwidth, etc. And you'll leverage some of these, but you also want to extend that and monitor the services. So we work through a few options here. So again, we'll take advantage of cloud provided monitoring capabilities that I just mentioned. But Esri also has the ArcGIS Monitor out there, which could be a really nice tool to monitor your entire ArcGIS infrastructure. We'll also leverage some lightweight Python scripts that we've written at GIS Inc. to help us monitor certain aspects of the system. And then lastly, we'll leverage a third-party tool called PRTG, which allows us to create additional insights into the systems that we're going to provide access to our enterprise GIS. So whatever you use, make sure that you do provide some level of monitoring, not just the platform, but also the services, so you can make sure that your site stays healthy and active so that the applications and web maps are up and running. And if you want to, you feel free to check out the blog below for more information on cloud monitoring options that you can use within the platform there. So as I wrap things up here, let me summarize what I've covered. So first and foremost, don't fear the cloud. There's so many benefits, as we've heard already today, for using the cloud. Again, everything from capabilities with moving away from traditional data center capabilities and leveraging what the cloud providers offer us, to performance, scalability, elasticity, to cost. Again, this is probably one of the biggest ones, paying for what you use when you use it. And then again, security, additional security all rolled in to these cloud provider offerings. There's many ways to adopt the cloud. Again, it's not a one size fits all approach. Maybe start with a hybrid approach, leveraging some cloud offerings for certain aspects of your enterprise GIS. But the long story short, is the cloud itself and the cloud providers out there provide significant benefits, services, and offerings to be taken advantage of. And as I mentioned when I started things off, I mean, keeping it very high level here today, but if you want to dig down into the weeds, if this really is something that you're seriously starting to look into, maybe you're in the middle of it and you want to learn more, whatever your scenario is, you can check out this webinar here that we did not long ago that will really dig down into more of the specifics. I can include the link in the chat if you want to check it out. We also did a panel discussion on the subject just last week. So you can hear some real world feedback from some clients that are going through or have gone through the process themselves. And then lastly, if this is something, again, that you're starting to think about, you can hook up with one of our cloud experts at GIS Inc. and go through a free cloud assessment for your organization. So on behalf of myself and GIS Inc., really appreciate the opportunity to come out and talk to you all today about this really exciting subject. If you have any questions, you see my email address listed right there. And again, I'll try to post the links to those other resources in the chat so you don't have to remember how to get to them. Thank you so much, folks. Nate, I'll turn it back to you now.
Thanks, Tim. At this time, it's Q&A time. So to begin, feel free to turn on your camera, mute yourself, and ask some questions. I'm going to quickly go through some of the session Q&As that have been posted, and then we can just open it up for a forum here. I guess to start, for Brendan and Lindsay, there's a couple questions for you. First one by Justin Chin. While the cloud does address the GIS disadvantage of having physical space taken up by equipment, how secure is the data once it's stored there?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And the data, once it's in the cloud, is extremely secure. I don't want to get into like all the boring specifics here because we only have so much time. But the data is extremely secure when it's in the cloud. I know that there is kind of this, I've heard the word paradigm shift used a lot in these other presentations, and I think that's a great way to put it. I know that in like traditional networking, traditional IT, there is, this idea of using an intranet, never having anything leave your network. There is definitely equivalent security in the cloud, and you can have, your cloud GIS as locked down as you want it to be. You can have it, more open while still being very secure. So I would say very equivalent.
Yeah, and our internal IT team did a thorough, like when we started this, they had all these, see, I'm not in IT, but like BMPs, I don't know, vendor sheets and meetings with them to lay out like standards that they expect. And I think it all went really well. So like on the internal end, accessing it, and then also on Rock's end, like managing it. So the IT, our IT had no issues on that end.
Great. I guess with we only have one more question, so I don't know if John or Tim, if you have any thoughts on that as well from your end.
No,
regarding
with
Go
what
ahead,
Lindsay
Tim.
said. Yeah, I echo what Lindsay said.
I mean, I can also add that, if you talk about security in the cloud, Tim touched on it. I showed a diagram of the AWS responsibility model. And when you think about security in the cloud, AWS takes a big responsibility role. So they're in charge of the physical security of the data centers, the things that Tim was talking about, the fences, the locked doors. So you don't have to worry about any of that. With regard to the customer's responsibility, you're still responsible for things like encrypting your data at rest, encrypting your data in transit, using SSL, using these protocols to encrypt them, using keys, key management store. So as a software developer, as a consultant, as a systems administrator, there are definitely still responsibilities and things that need to happen with regard to security to ensure that you have security. But overall, if you're fearful of security in the cloud, just my understanding and knowledge is that it is a myth, like Tim was talking about, because it would be really hard to break into somebody's other systems, somebody's other data, somebody else's data, because you don't know where it is. It's virtually impossible. If you're the most secure organizations in the cloud, and they have compliances for all sorts of different verticals from healthcare to defense that ensures these security practices are implemented in the cloud. The most secure organizations you can actually put your code and data on dedicated servers. And so you can isolate your code even further. So there's all these different options on how deep you want to go with security in the cloud. But that said, some organizations will never go to the cloud. We worked with the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna, Austria, and they are an air-gapped system, and they will never move to the cloud. But that, well, I should say never, but it's political. All politics aside, there's really no issues with security in the cloud. It's a myth. So I'll just add that.
Yeah, I think it might even be a little better. I mean, when our IT was internally hosting it, I mean, we were having like certificate issues on browsers because our Internet Explorer, we were still using Internet Explorer. So like on the flip side, like some of our systems could be so old that it's even less secure on our internal end.
Yeah, I mean, as a consultant, I have way more tools, and I'm way more in control of security right here in my house than I would if I walked into a data center like in the old days and put on booties and a lab jacket and walked around with somebody escorting me around to log into a computer. I've been there before, and it's impossible to get things done. It's so much easier, so much more efficient, and there's tools available that continually scan your environment. You can set up all sorts of different security using these native cloud technologies, and to continuously ensure that you're compliant with your organization's security rules. So it's very powerful with regard to security.
Great. No, that's a good point about actually upping your own organization's security by going through these. The only other question I see here out of some questions I have is, Lindsay, there's a question from Larry Garland here. Does the client have to license all the quote unquote, all the cool tools that RK uses?
So as far as like the really cool stuff, a lot of that just comes with the cloud, right? That's one of the benefits of using these, essentially these massive, systems of infrastructure that Amazon and Microsoft Azure, that they've set up, Google Cloud, with any of these big providers, they have all of these like really cool tools that just come inherently with the cloud. Of course, there's a whole variety of things that go into that, right? Some of them, one of the biggest things about the cloud, one of the biggest benefits, right, when it comes to us as GIS people, we're continuing to deal with very large data, right? You get your imagery, right? And you get this like super cool imagery. How the heck do you like serve it up quickly, right? Well, that is something that like storage buckets and a whole variety of the tools that like John actually had some good diagrams on. There's a whole variety of tools that you can use to serve up that imagery super quickly, right? So when it comes to like licensing in the cloud, it's not so much a consideration of licensing, it's kind of a consideration of like what resources are you using, and you pay for what you use, right? And again, it's this kind of paradigm shift. Again, it's a great word to use, because in the past we've thought about we're licensing things, right? So I pay a certain amount of money to license this software, to license this product. But one of the really cool things about the cloud is that you only pay for what you use, right? So do I need this thing right now? Yep, I'll spin it up, I'll use it, I'll pay for what I use. And then, oh, you know what, next month I don't need it, so I'll turn it off. I don't need to pay for it. So of course, there's a variety of considerations when it comes to the Esri platform, Esri software, and then of course, there's the cool stuff that's specific to the cloud. And then finally, at ROC, we have a variety of products that we offer to clients as part of our managed services. So that's the other consideration there. Esri has their own licensing items. With the cloud, it's a lot more about pay as you use. And then what Brendan was talking about with some of the cool things that we do for like Maine and Connecticut water, that's just like an included part of our managed services. So, you know, we offer them the managed services. It's kind of a unique thing because, like I said, we don't manage the, you know, what actually comes out of the GIS. Like Brendan and Dan over at Maine and CT Water, like they're still doing like the cool stuff, right? They're taking like the cool new software from Esri, they're pushing it out, they're creating awesome, cool products. We're just like managing like the cloud backend, the security, the performance, all that kind of thing. But basically, we offer them managed services each month that are kind of just a chunk of hours that they can use for anything that they're interested in. So if they want us to create them like a cool widget, we just did that for Connecticut Water. If they want some additional Python scripts, we can do that. If they want tools built, we can do that. So that part is just kind of part of our managed services. So
Yeah, I didn't talk about S3. Was that is S3 include? So I know we use it for AWS, like that's where our stuff's stored, right?
Yep.
For our workspace, but we also use it for cloud images that we access from GIS, but also now recently. So I guess I didn't even really mention that we're a water utility, like drinking water utility. So we do clean water, but so we have images for as-built and all this stuff, and as of 2019, that was loaded onto laptop hard drives as folders of images. So now, and you know, as soon as you do that, then it's old because I added a new one. So recently, or since we made the switch, there's sync tools with S3 that I have a folder on the network with all my images and stuff like that, and I add them and then I sync it to S3. Not only does it work through our apps, like, you know, our web app viewers and our collector, stuff like that, we also got a third-party app called File Browser for Business, and it connects to that S3 bucket. So now my field guys, you know, basically our JS isn't complete. We have things that, you know, don't have good links to them and stuff like that. So they have to look up by address or something like that. So they have a way to go outside of GIS because we, you know, installed this S3 kind of viewer app that they can go look at those. So that's kind of really a nice other, like it was like included, but I didn't know anything about it really until a couple months down the road, and we've been able to make that work, and it's been huge. And I can push those images out instantly because not all of our field service guys have access to the network. They just have mobile, so they can get everything on mobile they need. So that's been really a cool inclusion.
yeah,
Cool.
Maine and Connecticut Water, they utilize a lot of storage. So S3 is just like Amazon storage buckets, you know, and there's many cool things to S3 and to storage in Amazon, but storage in S3 is ludicrously cheap. So
Yeah.
you can have like really big imagery, like, you know, like raster type imagery. You can have like individual like JPEGs, which, you know, Maine and Connecticut have a lot of. And then a lot of times S3 kind of meets an interesting need where you have people who are like your GIS people, you know, have kind of separated the GIS and pushed it up to the cloud because it's this extensive platform that IT doesn't necessarily maybe want to manage, but, you know, it's very different from a lot of other software platforms. So they move it up to the cloud and GIS is kind of up there, but then you have these on-premise folks who maybe need to share files, need to share images. And so if you have two different networks, you know, how do you make that happen, right? And so S3 can kind of fit that because you can have a whole bunch of storage in S3 that you can make available to a whole bunch of people in a variety of different ways. And Maine and Connecticut have come up with some really cool ways to do that.
That leads into one of the questions I had where I and others, are there great tools? What tools are available for these platforms, AWS, Azure, for calculating storage costs depending on the different file formats and databases that you're looking for?
Yeah, so both Amazon and Azure have calculators that you can go to online. If you just Google like Azure pricing calculator, AWS pricing calculator, there's really easy to use calculators out there. Of course, you have 3 totally awesome companies on the call who could also like help you out with calculating, you know, costs in the cloud. But you can also do it yourself. Again, just Google Azure pricing calculator, AWS pricing calculator, and there you can get any pricing that you want for the cloud. You can get the exact price it's going to cost you for, you know, actual computer servers in the cloud, for storage in the cloud, for virtual desktop solutions. So pretty easy to find.
Great. There's a couple other questions that have recently come in. Andrew Thompson had one on AWS specifically that kind of cuts off at the end. Andrew, I don't know if you want to pipe in and discuss it
I can
all.
see the whole thing. Is it about Arc Pro?
It is. So
Do you want me to read it?
Sure, if you'd like.
Okay. So they currently use AWS workspaces for GIS users. It's similar to what we do. And they're trying to make the move to Arc Pro for all new projects. One complaint we have is that Arc Pro is slow. Yeah, it is. And in the AWS workspace, we have tried AppStream, which doesn't seem to be a solution for us other than upgrading our AWS to the AWS workspace with a GPU, which I think we've tried as well, which is really expensive. It kind of bumps up your monthly costs per user. What other options may there be for users?
Yeah.
Go ahead. You want to go, Lindsay, and then I'll go with my experience.
Totally. Well, it's actually a really great question. And it's something that Maine and Connecticut are not currently using, but it's funny because like, based on what you guys are doing right now, I was actually just talking to my coworker, Jason Harris, who is like the dude to talk to about this stuff. Like he loves talking about what I'm about to mention. But I was just talking about actually Maine and Connecticut. I was going to talk to you guys about this later, but this is not something that you guys are currently utilizing. But for customers who want to use ArcGIS Pro, the way to make it super crazy fast and have it be way more affordable than anything, you know, with either like, you know, with AppStream or anything like that, and the GPU enabled stuff in AWS, it's just not the right solution for ArcGIS Pro because it's prohibitively expensive. So we actually use Citrix. So that is our virtual desktop solution for folks who want to be able to use ArcGIS Pro and be able to use it the way it's meant to be used, right? And I had actually, like, until I started working for Rock, I had never seen ArcGIS Pro like work the way it's actually supposed to work. And it's pretty sweet. Like when you actually get ArcGIS Pro to like work super well and you can actually work with 3D imagery like just smoothly, it's
not even 3D.
Like
seriously, yeah.
It's super amazing. So that is actually what we usually recommend for customers is to use like a GPU enabled machine that you're virtualizing using Citrix. So that's what we have actually a lot of customers set up with, not Maine and Connecticut, but that's kind of probably where we'll probably be moving you guys as you move more into using ArcGIS Pro.
Yeah, it's been up and down for me. You know, we did try they allowed me to like trial a GPU workstation and didn't do anything. So I don't think that's worth it for you to try. I mean, you might try it, Andrew, but it didn't. I think Lindsay, was it you that were helping? This was way back a year ago.
Yeah.
And you're probably like, I don't think it's going to do much. I think you were telling me this and I was like, okay.
Yeah, since you guys are already set up with like workspaces, that is actually what I told you was like, here you go. I upgraded it and you can try.
It just seems to just, you know, so we just do 2D and if you keep it really simple, it's usable, but it's nothing compared to ArcMap, and it's sad because it's 2020 and, you know, I mean, I like to use Arc Pro, especially now in 10.8.1 to do like public web publishing and stuff, but I'm not editing in it. It's too painful. And so, yeah, that's just something ongoing. Yeah, go ahead. Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the response. Yeah, we've been really struggling. We have close to 100 GIS users in our company, and we're trying to push to Arc Pro, and this has been a really big struggle for us. And like we want to try again to start doing the 3D.
You want to like
it
too,
possible.
You know?
Yeah. Like I'm one of the more advanced Pro users, and I'm trying to train all these people to use Pro, and they're just like, they're just hesitant because it's really struggling to get the speed going. So what kind of is it? Does it support like that many users? The Citrix? Is it scalable?
It is, absolutely. So you can have as many users as you want to, and the price is going to be, especially with the more users that you get on there, the price like per user comes down dramatically. I mean, no matter what, it's so much cheaper than, AppStream, anything like with the Amazon products that are GPU enabled, like it's so much cheaper. And as you bring more users on, the cost like drops per user. And we actually we have demos. Like if you want to see what it's like to run Pro in Citrix, like we can get you for, like a little demo that you can like log into and check it out. We have lots of that sitting around. So if you want to see what it looks
That'd
like
be great. Yes.
in Citrix, yeah, just reach out to me and we
Well,
can.
me too, please.
Yeah, that's right.
I can also add that, a different perspective is that I'm working with an enterprise customer with 100 ArcMap users, and they want to move to Pro, and we're using AppStream, and it's working great. It's I don't know, Lindsay's probably right with cost comparison with Citrix. I know AppStream is cheaper than workstations, but so far it's working well, and it may depend on your use case. If you want to do a lot of 3D stuff, then you're going to have to increase your instance type. So you're going to have more GPU power, which equals more money. If you're doing image processing or something, you could get away with a lesser instance type, a more standard instance type, which may not be GPU enabled. The other consideration is where your users are and where your data is. This customer, their data centers are on the West Coast, so they're in AWS US West. About a quarter of their users are in Maine. So for use cases where they're doing a lot of 3D visualization, they're app streaming from US East on the East Coast and having a VPC peering connection using the AWS internet backbone to stream their data from US West across the United States. If they're doing heavy geoprocessing where they need to have their GPU or their CPUs, their compute next to their data, they're streaming from US West in the same virtual private cloud. So it really comes down to what, in my opinion, what your use case is. What are you using ArcPro for? What are you using ArcMap? What are you doing with geoprocessing? Where your data lives in the cloud on premise, and where your users are, because it really depends if you need to get your compute and your data next to each other, or you can get away with, or if streaming and 3D visualization is more important to you, then maybe you want to get the pixels closer to you that are streaming across the internet. But ESRI has documentation on AppStream and workspaces in AWS, as well as longtime Citrix relationship. So those are all viable solutions. I think it's just comes down to pricing and also management. AppStream, if you have 100 users, there's not a lot of tools to manage these sessions. Citrix is a very mature technology. AppStream is fairly new. And Workspaces is like a desktop, but it's probably the most expensive AWS choice. So just some more thoughts.
There is one
I have a
other
question after that.
AppStream question, just quickly.
Yeah.
Christine Seidel, do you still need a local install of ArcPro with AppStream?
You do not. You certainly, a lot of our customers oftentimes will be like, well, we want, our local users to be able to have, ArcGIS Pro. But then we also want, our cloud users to have ArcGIS Pro. I mean, you can have license managers in both places, like locally and in the cloud, but you don't have to have a local install of Pro to run Pro and AppStream.
Yeah, so AppStream, to go in a little more deep dive, is you build an image. And so you create an image, you install ArcPro, you can install ArcMap, the whole desktop, any other GIS applications. The administrator takes that image and creates a pool, and you add security to it, you add users to it, you assign it an instance type, and then you make it available to your Active Directory or your identity pools. There are drawbacks in management to that. So for example, if you are serving out different versions, every time you need a version upgrade, you have to upgrade this master image and you have to redeploy it. So there's definitely management involved in it, and you need somebody, a consultant or a systems administrator, to manage that process. It's a little more management than having you offload that from your users to more of a centralized management. So from a user perspective, it's better. But you definitely takes some AWS expertise to do that. But
Brandon, you're going to say something else.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've never heard of AppStream until today, but you know, one of the things is we have these multiple users, and we have a few people that are kind of just rudimentary editors in ArcMap. And by the time they log in for the second time, there's another update to, you know, I don't know if is AppStream more of like a light, it could be like a light editor where this guy is going in once a month maybe and just doing some basic edits instead of a workspace. Or is it
Oh.
not worth having the difference? I don't know, Lindsay.
Well, yeah, you guys have the workspaces because it's like kind of it's a desktop like up in the cloud, right? It functions that way. AppStream is a lot more like virtualized applications. So you're going to like stream an application, and there are different use cases for each one. I apologize. My neighbors have decided right now is like the time to cut down a tree. But yeah, anyway. So, and with Citrix, you can actually do kind of both of those. So you can like virtualize applications, you can virtualize a desktop, you can have kind of either experience.
At our company, we're not on the cloud currently, but we do have a wide range across the whole US. So as a result, with certain data centers, we have found internally Citrix works well for us. As you've explained, for just applications or desktops.
There's certainly more people using Citrix than AppStream or AWS workspaces for sure.
And that AppStream just somehow reads our same database or enterprise.
Yep.
Yeah, so you put your app streams in the same network, VPC, as your data, and then you'll be able to connect to your SQL Server, ArcSDE databases, or they can live outside of VPC if you're just consuming web services through ArcGIS Server. But you can connect to your S3 data, you can connect to your Microsoft OneDrive or Google Drives into AppStream, and that's how you move your local data. There's also a Windows client for AppStream, which allows better connectivity to your hard drives and USB drives, so you can work with your data as well. But keep in mind, that's pretty much having a local data and streaming that
which
data.
is what you want to avoid.
Yes. So it's almost unworkable. So there are definitely disadvantages to streaming apps opposed to having a workspace where you can copy the data locally. And if you have it in S3, we found that it works fairly fast. But if you're using OneDrive or Google Drive or your local drives, obviously it's like running a shapefile across the internet, which you could imagine is not going to work.
I don't see any additional questions coming, but I have another one based on the point that you brought up earlier, John, with Kubernetes and Farsight, Fargate, my mistake. Currently with Esri planning to roll out Kubernetes Enterprise with the coming new year, do you all see this as a trend or some far-reaching goal where most organizations will want to transition to something that's a little more serverless?
For advanced GIS workflows for geoprocessing, quite frankly, in the past, as many folks know, ArcGIS has not been very scalable. It is really not done well in the past with running large workloads or processing lots of requests or being able to host 1,000 map services. Every time you host a service in ArcGIS server, it consumes a little bit of memory. And in the past, it wouldn't take very many services to consume your GIS server. And you can do all sorts of things like setting instances and trying to do all this stuff to manage your memory to make sure you have enough memory allocated, but there's trade-offs. So maybe your service isn't running because you don't want it to consume memory, and a request comes in, so you spin it up, so that person has to wait for that service to spin up, and eventually they'll get their request fulfilled. With containers, it's a whole new paradigm, and I believe it is the future. It's been around for a while, and ESRI is fully in on board with it, and at even a low-level engineering, low-level ArcGIS level internally in Redlands, they are certainly all in on Kubernetes and containers. But you know, for the average GIS analyst, you know, it's probably going to be a while till they start writing container applications. But if you're in an organization that has a team of software developers and a budget and something that does a lot of geoprocessing, certainly containers is a no-brainer right now. You know, a year ago, 2 years ago, I didn't really see much of that going on. And just in the last 12 months, that's the way people are going. There's not really a choice. So if you're going to do high level data processing, application, high availability with applications, geoprocessing, that kind of stuff, it's pretty cool.
And the one thing I would just say there really quick, containerization, been around a long time, really excellent use cases. Esri's lagged a little bit just in terms of kind of getting that support. And so finally, you know, with that support, you know, it's really exciting. I think that John makes a really good point that for kind of the typical GIS analyst, you know, maybe right now is not the time. But the one other thing that I would say too is that before you kind of get to that point of looking at the really advanced technology, the one thing I would encourage you to do is really make sure that your workflows, you know, as they are, make sense. So a lot of times people look to more advanced technology to kind of address issues that they're currently having. And I think an important thing to do first is to make sure that your workflows are as seamless as they can be. You know, I think that it was Tim over GIS Inc. who talked a lot about like documentation, documenting everything that you have now, really cleaning everything up, making sure that your workflows are good. And an initial transition to the cloud can be a great way to do that. Take what you're doing internally, move it to the cloud, but clean it up, make it really streamlined, and then start to really look at those advanced technologies. So I always like to talk about like kind of the workflow and like people aspect in addition to like the really advanced technology part too.
Yeah, I can give a real world example of a container project that was a little exciting. Is that we were working with some agriculture folks that were on a soil model, and it was raster based. So if you're doing any raster based analysis, it takes a lot of processing. You're going pixel by pixel, you're analyzing the surrounding pixels. So what these people did, it would take hours and days to process some of these fields. You know, it was a farmer's field. You'd draw a polygon and you'd want to figure out soil loss on their field. And so what we did is we took the soil model that would just process on one computer, and we spun up containers to process groups of pixels. And so we would chop out, you know, pre-process the field into smaller grids, spin off, you know, 10, 20, 50 containers, depending on how big the field was. And then you'd have a one container, the lead container, would take all the results when they were finished and compile the analysis together. And so that's kind of high performance computing. You can think of containers really improving the things that would take days and days to finish. Now you can do very quickly, and it's attainable. You know, if you're creating a web app to send those results back, you know, people don't want to wait 5 days, but they may wait 10 seconds or 5 seconds if it's if you can, and you can attain that with containers. So that's the level of geoprocessing that I'm talking about, is things that were unattainable a couple of years ago, you can do now.
That's really exciting. And I'm glad, like you say, Lindsay, that Esri's just getting on board. It's exciting to see what they can do with all this. Unless anyone wants to pipe up with any additional questions, I think we're at our time. So thank you, Lindsay, Brendan, John, and Tim for presenting. And if anyone did have any additional questions, please feel free to post them back in that Whova session, and our speakers can answer them when they come in. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
moderating,
everybody.
Nate. Thanks.
Good day.